Hi, welcome to Sacred Enzyme. I'm Stacy. I hope you're doing well today. So I wanted to share this book that I found, which is, I always say it's pretty interesting that my guide must leave books for me at the used book section at my public library, because I got this book and let me tell you, this thing is very interesting. This was written about how they create the bells, the bell tower sounds, and how they cast the bells for these musical towers. And one of them is Bach Tower Gardens, which is in Central Florida, and there is a bell tower that is built there, and there's a picture of it in here, I'm sure, in the back. And basically the tower was made out of bricks and other things that came from other old world structures that had been dismantled. And only the top third of that tower was built. The rest of it was just things that were put in place that were taken from other places. And if anybody studies old world Florida stuff, you need to look at Olmsted Architects, because they are one of these big companies that were involved in the reset. And so anyway, what I wanted to talk about was how these bells are made. And one of the very interesting things is about how they're cast and the process that's done for that. They're calibrated and temporal tuning, which is really interesting that they call it temporal tuning. So a lot of people have been talking about ancient Egypt lately, because, you know, they just had that report come out where this group of people had tried this new technology, and they found these 8 pillars that go underneath one of the pyramids. I think it was the Khafre pyramid, not the biggest one, but the second one in the middle. So when I came across this book, the first thing that I just couldn't believe that I found it, because this is information that you really can't find anymore about how they put these bells into the tower, what it was for, how the music's played, because, you know, they have people that come in to play the bells at Bach Tower, because these carillon bells, you have to have a carillon, and they're trained like in Switzerland, in Germany, in the Alps, in these areas. They still do these bell ring playing traditions. And so you know, you've had carillons, it's a tongue twister, that have come from all over the world to play, be employed as the next carillon at Bach Tower Gardens. Is pretty fascinating, because this is like a skill. This is like a skill. So it's interesting that so many things are being found out about Egypt, and I want to put forth, you know, just offer the information that I've gotten in my astral travels and from Theo about a few things that were going on in Egypt, and what I think that the pyramids really are. And we all know that they're not tombs. Obviously, they were built for a reason, and it was conduct electricity. So the reason the carillon, the building of the carillon bells in Bach Tower Gardens, these bells were made in order to cast. They were cast in a reverberation furnace, and they were built cast in order to push or carry frequency or energy. And one of the reasons that I honestly believe that these bells were rang at different times during the day was all about them all being in resonance with each other, ringing at the precise same time to push and push, and then the next one to push, and the next one to push. They were pushing this all across the planet through these bells. This was part of a carrying of planetary grid workings. And one of the reasons that I feel like they were pulled during the Second World War to supposedly make ammunition melted down had nothing to do with that. That was when we went into the reset. This was the reset. And this is when we had these black sun groups that are in the lower polarity, that are the polarity that exist on the planet, that have fallen and they've forgotten that they're in polarity. This was a time that they were involved in resetting the planet and working towards the long game of the one world government. So this right here is what a reverberation furnace looks like. And if you look at this right here, you'll notice it looks awful lot like the shafts that are in the pyramid. And the reason that they're built that way is because of the way that they channel the energy out, carry the heat out of these furnaces through all these little shafts that are built in here. So it kind of makes you wonder if this looks a lot like the same kind of geometry here. As you see, if you cut the pyramid right in half and you look at it from the side, you see these chambers that go off to the left and to the right. And the other interesting thing is that those directions actually represent like a cardinal order of either masculine or feminine or something like that. And so on to the next thing about them that I found was interesting in this book is that they have some of the music and the tuning, like the temporal tuning, and a lot of the way that the notes are. You know, you have a 3 interval. You have a resonance of like a tritone frequency that's being pushed, and part of it you don't recognize it, but the notes that they play, a lot of them are sharps. And I noticed by going back and looking at some of the music, and then the letters, the sharp notes that they were playing corresponded with the frequency that had to do with the root chakra a lot of times, the solar plexus, the heart, and the third eye. And so some songs would just focus on the third eye, the heart, and the root. And some would just be the heart and the solar plexus. I mean, it was really interesting how different songs were targeting different energy zones. And I just thought that was really interesting how very fine-tuned the cymatic music of these bells was for healing the masses and pushing energy across the planet. So I want to talk about a time that Theo told me about. I haven't shared a lot of the stuff that he's told me about, but he told me about a time during the 18th dynasty in Egypt when, I just got a thump on my watch, when we had Pharaoh Akhenaten, and he had a wife that was named Nefertiti, and he had another sister wife, and her name was Kaya. There were more wives than those two, but the two that he talked about were those two. Okay, during that time, there was an agreement that had happened in the higher realms about coming back and reversing the matrix at that time and starting to bring people out of the polarity. And so these groups, these draconian groups that were all around in the Middle East and all of these areas, that at that time they would go into these periodic agreements where they would want to acquire the ascension mechanics to be able to go back to source. They wanted to come out of the third dimensional realm during the next 26,000 year ascension cycle, which is now. Okay, this is how many times this has been done over and over. And to wake everybody up and say, okay, we all come from source. There's no other God. One, it's source. And so they said it was the sun god, because God source controls the sun. I mean, and we can't live without the sun. The sun makes us healthy. It gives us codes. So during this time, Akhenaten and Nefertiti and Kaya, they all had an agreement in these higher realms. They were going to come back. They were going to reintroduce these codes. They were going to be involved in these particular breeding programs to help this draconian group to get out of the field here and ascend. And so they were going to have to reactivate their dormant DNA to bring them back closer to source. Well, the reality of it is that in that time, they knew all about ascension mechanics, okay? They had the mystery schools. They were teaching the mystery schools. Nefertiti was teaching the mystery schools. Nefertiti was Theo. Theo was Nefertiti in that lifetime. Nefertiti had agreed to come back to have these bloodlines to be able to provide these ascension mechanics. So Akhenaten's his counterpart was actually Kaya, his that he was supposed to be paired up with when they came here. Nefertiti, this whole thing was stuff that happened here. Okay, so anyway, the true couple in it was Nefertiti and Kaya. They were soulmates that came back onto the planet to do the work. And as I said, Theo, Theo was Nefertiti. Okay. All right. So during this lifetime, they were trying to bring everybody back to source, teach the ascension mechanics, return the genetic codes that had been messed up from hybridization and genetic mutations. And so they wanted to ascend. They agreed into these programs. But then one of the father-in-laws, I don't know if it was Nefertiti, if it was Kaya, or if it was one of the other sister wives, because this was kind of like a concubine thing. This was all about doing codes. This is why these certain rulers had all these wives. It was about bringing back ascension codes. It wasn't about because they just wanted to have sex with everybody. You know, I'm sure that they got the cream of the crop, but it was about ascension codes. It was about ascension codes. So it ended up being infiltrated by one of the father-in-laws who was going along with this agenda to not let the return to source and the ascension mechanics happen. He was working with the Black Sun group. And what ended up happening is that they actually got put in breeding programs, is the way that I understand it. They were taken, Kaya and Nefertiti were taken. They were put in breeding programs. They were eventually murdered. And Akhenaten, it was just a bad scene. And they had all these kids. And there was, Akhenaten and Nefertiti actually had one child that died. There was another baby. And that baby died. But Kia was the mother of King Tut. And King Tut had a sister, which was Scotia, that went to Scotland. This is where Scotland comes from, is from Scotia. And I keep getting that Berlin is really, really important. And for some reason, all of the stuff that I start looking to, I always end up back in Berlin. And so, so we have artifacts from the 18th dynasty that are being held in Berlin. They're at the museum there in Berlin. And Akhenaten, he had to what do you call that when you give your throne up, depose yourself? When to a 10-year-old son of his, King Tut, made him king out of duress, because the empire would have been decimated. There would have been nothing left of it. So, and then, 8 or 9 years later, King Tut, he gets, so, it was just a time. It was just biding the time, flipping it back up. And, and then all of the artifacts that are left, most of them have been defaced. They took all their inscriptions off the walls. I mean, they went through so much trouble to completely obliterate all recognition of that 18th century dynasty. But that's what that time period was about. This was all, this all had to do with Jesus' time coming at a later event. It was all tied in together. So, it was one of the father-in-laws that had actually been the one that was instrumental in removing Queen Nefertiti and Kaya, King Tut's mother. And maybe Akhenaten was the one, or maybe it was one of Meritata or one of the other sisters that made the arrangements for Scotia to get out of Egypt. So she wasn't going to get murdered, because this is what was happening to all of them. They were being executed. They were being executed. So the question is that when Scotia went to Scotland, was she going back to where they came from? Because they originally came from the Iberian Peninsula after Atlantis? I think we should look at that. I do. And, you know, I mean, there's just, I don't know. I just think that, you know, there's just so much that we haven't been told the truth about. And so, you know, what's going on under that pyramid? And, you know, how is it that looking at books like these and how they actually made these bells and how intricately they are intertwined with frequency and cymatics and being tied into the planetary grid and pushing sound and vibration, scalar grids, pushing energy, pushing frequencies, healing frequencies. It's no wonder that all these things were taken out. And you know they were here for a long time, these churches and these places, when you go and you see empty bell towers, folks. So with that, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? You know, I got to do some research on the life of Akhenaten and Nefertiti and Kaya and Tut and Scotia and see, you know, if I can verify all of this stuff. But, you know, I just thought it was really interesting that I was reading this book about these carillon bells and how they're cast and how the music's made and how they're temporally tuned. It just blew me away. And all of this stuff goes back to the grid work that was done on the planet. And it's all about frequency chambers. Frequency chambers. These buildings are full of frequency chambers. So with that, when you come and find me, I'll be here. We're living in the past, present, and the future, all at the same time. We're waking up every day, folks. Make your intent known. We want heaven on earth. Heaven on earth. We can manifest it quick. If everyone puts their attention on it, we focus the energy on it, it will manifest it. We create toroidal fields, and we are creator beings. Let's start creating, folks. We're living in the past, present, and the future all at the same time. We're running in cycles. It's time to wake up. So don't forget to give thanks to our Heavenly Father and our Divine Mother, Mother Earth, for being with us right now during this 26,000-year ascension cycle. She's back. Upgrades are coming. Upgrades are coming. Every 26,000 years, we get some kind of upgrade. And so the question is are we going to survive the upgrade and go into the age like no other, because we got to wake up this time? So thanks for watching Sacred Enzyme. Don't forget to share and like the video. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. We need to know, everybody needs to know what we're put here for and what we're supposed to be doing as stewards to our planet. So thanks for watching Sacred Enzyme, and I hope to catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.